Imagine this. Coca-Cola announces it's investing billions to help Pepsi build a new, state-of-the-art bottling plant. Imagine Ford, in the heat of the 1960s muscle car wars, writing a multi-billion-dollar check to General Motors to fund the development of the next Corvette. It sounds absurd. It sounds impossible. It sounds like a fundamental misunderstanding of how capitalism, competition, and human nature work. For 30 years, this is what the rivalry between Nvidia and Intel has looked like. A bitter, zero-sum war for the soul of computing. It has been a conflict defined by brutal competition, public insults, and high-stakes lawsuits fought in courtrooms across the globe. One company was the undisputed king, the other a relentless upstart. Their battle shaped the digital world we live in. And then, hell froze over. In a move that has sent a shockwave through Silicon Valley and every major world capital, Nvidia, the newly crowned titan of the technology world, announced a multi-billion-dollar strategic investment into its oldest and most bitter rival, Intel. The news is so counterintuitive, so profoundly shocking, it feels like a glitch in the Matrix. After 3 decades of animosity, why would Jensen Huang, Nvidia's triumphant CEO, a man who has steered his company to a staggering $4 trillion valuation, hand a lifeline to the one company he spent his entire career trying to beat? What is going on here? This isn't a story about forgiveness. It's not a truce born of newfound friendship. This is a story of cold, hard, geopolitical necessity. It is a pragmatic and perhaps desperate move by the world's most important technology company to build a fortress on safe ground, even if it means funding its oldest enemy. This is the definitive story of the most shocking tech deal of the decade. To understand how seismic this announcement is, you first have to understand the sheer depth of the animosity between these two companies. For most of modern computing history, there was Intel, and then there was everyone else. They were the undisputed chip king, the company that literally put the silicon in Silicon Valley, establishing the x86 architecture as the unchallenged standard for personal computing. Their dominance was near total, their market share seemingly unassailable. Nvidia, by contrast, was the scrappy upstart. Founded in 1993, they carved out a niche in a new and burgeoning field: graphics processing units, or GPUs. These were specialized chips designed to render the increasingly complex 3D graphics of video games, a market Intel had largely dismissed. The rivalry truly ignited in the early 2000s, a period marked by one of the greatest strategic blunders in corporate history. In 2005, then Intel CEO Paul Otellini, in a moment of rare foresight, pitched his board on acquiring Nvidia. He recognized that the parallel processing power of graphics chips might one day revolutionize computing far beyond just gaming, particularly in data centers. The price tag was a then astronomical $20 billion. The board balked. Citing the unprecedented cost and Intel's historically poor track record with large acquisitions, they rejected the deal. Instead, Intel chose to fight. It poured hundreds of millions of dollars into an internal project called rivalry, a moonshot attempt to build a revolutionary GPU from the ground up that would leapfrog Nvidia's technology. It was an unmitigated disaster. Plagued by delays and disappointing performance, the project collapsed in 2009, cementing Nvidia's dominance in graphics and, unknowingly, paving the way for its future reign in artificial intelligence. The failure of rivalry didn't end the war. It only made it more bitter. The conflict moved from the lab to the courtroom. In 2009, Intel sued Nvidia over a chipset licensing agreement, a move Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang publicly decried as an attempt to stifle innovation to protect a decaying CPU business. The battle raged for 2 years before Intel ultimately conceded, agreeing to pay Nvidia a massive $1.5 billion settlement to end the dispute. The public sparring was relentless. Huang openly mocked Intel's rivalry project as nothing more than a PowerPoint slide, accusing the giant of trying to cast a cloud over us to slow their momentum. Nvidia even launched a satirical cartoon website lampooning Intel's executives, portraying CEO Paul Otellini as Marlon Brando in The Godfather, making offers that rivals couldn't refuse. The message was clear. This wasn't just business, it was personal. This history reveals a fundamental truth about Intel's culture during its peak. The decision to pass on acquiring Nvidia in 2005 wasn't merely a financial miscalculation. It was a profound failure of imagination. Intel's entire corporate identity, its research and development pipeline, and its profit centers were built around the Central Processing Unit, CPU. They viewed the world through a CPU-centric lens. To them, a GPU was a peripheral, an accessory for a niche market of gamers, not a new computing paradigm in its own right. They were caught in the classic innovator's dilemma, a concept famously described by Harvard professor Clayton Christensen. They were so focused on serving their existing high-end, high-margin customers with ever more powerful CPUs that they were structurally incapable of seeing the disruptive threat emerging from what they perceived as a lower-end market. It was a catastrophic failure of strategic vision that would ultimately cost them their throne. For years, the war was asymmetric. Intel was the Goliath, Nvidia the David. But as the 2010s gave way to the 2020s, the ground began to shift. The world was changing. The rise of mobile computing, which Intel had famously missed, was just the prelude. The real revolution was AI. And the engine of the AI revolution wasn't the CPU. It was the GPU. The very same parallel processing architecture that made Nvidia's chips perfect for rendering millions of pixels in a video game made them uniquely suited for training the massive neural networks of artificial intelligence. While Intel continued to refine its powerful but sequential CPUs, Jensen Huang and Nvidia had been quietly building an entire ecosystem, from hardware to its proprietary CUDA software platform, perfectly tailored for the coming AI gold rush. When tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft raced to build the infrastructure for services like ChatGPT, they didn't turn to Intel. They turned to Nvidia. The result has been one of the most dramatic and rapid transfers of power in the history of technology. As recently as 2022, Intel's annual revenue was still double that of Nvidia's. But the market, which bets on the future, saw what was coming. Nvidia's market capitalization exploded, soaring past Intel's and then continuing on a meteoric rise. Today, Nvidia is worth over $4 trillion, making it one of the most valuable companies on Earth. Intel's market cap has fallen to under $150 billion. Nvidia will soon earn more revenue in a single quarter than Intel generates in an entire year. The upstart had not just defeated the king. It had taken the throne, the crown, and the entire kingdom. The 30-year war was over. Nvidia had won. Which makes the news of this investment all the more baffling. Why, at the moment of absolute victory, would you turn around and fund your vanquished foe? The answer lies not in Silicon Valley, but 6,000 miles away, in a small island nation in the East China Sea. To understand Nvidia's shocking move, you have to understand its single greatest vulnerability, an Achilles heel so profound it threatens the company's very existence. Nvidia is what's known in the industry as a fabless company. This means they are masters at designing the world's most advanced and complex chips, but they don't actually own any of the factories, or fabs, that manufacture them. For that, they rely on a partner. And for nearly all of their most important products, that partner is one company, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. Every flagship Nvidia product that powers our modern world, the H100 and Blackwell GPUs that are the engines of ChatGPT and the entire AI industry, the RTX graphics cards that sit inside millions of gaming PCs, is manufactured by TSMC in its state-of-the-art facilities in Taiwan. This dependency is not just significant, it is total, and it is growing. Nvidia is already TSMC's second-largest customer, trailing only Apple. In 2023, Nvidia's orders accounted for 11% of TSMC's total revenue. But as the AI boom accelerates, that number is set to explode. Analysts project that by 2025, Nvidia's contribution to TSMC's revenue will surge into the low 20s, matching Apple's share. Nvidia's entire business model, its spectacular growth, and its $4 trillion valuation are all built on the foundation of a single company, in a single country. So what is this company that holds the fate of the world's most important tech firm in its hands? TSMC is, without exaggeration, the most critical company that most people have never heard of. It is the linchpin of the entire global technology ecosystem. Through decades of relentless innovation and investment, Taiwan has achieved a level of dominance in the most critical manufacturing process on Earth that is without precedent. Today, the island nation fabricates over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors, the chips with features smaller than 5 nanometers that are the irreplaceable brains of our smartphones, our data centers, our cars, and our most advanced military hardware. To put this in perspective, imagine the entire global food supply depended on a single, unique strain of wheat that could only be grown on one small, politically contested island. That is the situation the world finds itself in with advanced chips, and that island is now widely considered the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint on the planet. Beijing considers Taiwan a renegade province and has made its reunification with the mainland a cornerstone of its national policy, refusing to rule out the use of force. In recent years, under Xi Jinping, China's rhetoric has grown more belligerent, and its military provocations, from flying fighter jets into Taiwan's air defense zone to conducting massive naval exercises simulating a full-scale blockade, have become a near-daily occurrence. The threat is no longer theoretical. For years, military planners and geopolitical analysts at think tanks like the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, have been wargaming the scenarios of a Chinese blockade or invasion of Taiwan. Their conclusions are unanimously catastrophic. A conflict over Taiwan would not be a regional skirmish. It would be a global economic cataclysm, plunging the world into a depression that would make the 2008 financial crisis look like a minor correction. The economic fallout estimates are staggering. A study by the Rhodium Group concluded that a blockade of Taiwan would disrupt over $2 trillion in economic activity annually. Bloomberg Economics calculated the total cost could reach a mind-boggling $10 trillion, equivalent to roughly 10% of global GDP, a shock larger than the COVID-19 pandemic and the global financial crisis combined. The immediate impact on the technology sector would be apocalyptic. With TSMC's fabs offline, the production of advanced chips would go to zero overnight. The AI revolution would grind to a halt. Smartphone production would cease. The auto industry, already reeling from previous chip shortages, would face a complete shutdown. As one report bluntly stated, this would not be a supply hiccup. It would be a global catastrophe of a sort not yet seen in the computer age. This reality has forced a moment of clarity within Nvidia's executive suites. A standard business playbook would call for diversifying suppliers to mitigate risk. But for the most advanced chips that drive Nvidia's profits, there is no viable alternative to TSMC. This isn't a typical supply chain risk that can be managed with a bit of extra inventory or by signing a contract with a secondary supplier in another country. The risk is binary and existential. If conflict erupts and Taiwan is cut off, Nvidia's production of its most valuable products drops to zero. This is a risk that cannot be insured against through conventional means. Therefore, Nvidia has been forced to pursue a deeply unconventional, enormously expensive, and long-term solution. It must create a new supplier, a credible alternative on safe ground. And that desperate search has led them to the doorstep of their oldest enemy. The story of this unlikely alliance isn't just about two companies. A third, powerful character has entered the scene, fundamentally reshaping the strategic calculus for everyone involved: the United States government. The Nvidia-Intel deal cannot be understood outside the context of a seismic shift in Washington's approach to technology and national security. For decades, the prevailing wisdom in Washington was that globalization and free trade would lead to greater stability. The US willingly offshored its manufacturing base, including the critical semiconductor industry, in a search for efficiency and lower costs. America's share of global chip manufacturing capacity plummeted from 37% in 1990 to a mere 10% by 2022. The pandemic-induced supply chain chaos and the escalating tensions over Taiwan shattered that consensus. Washington awoke to a stark reality. The country's economic and national security was dangerously dependent on a fragile supply chain centered on a geopolitical flashpoint. The response was the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022. This landmark piece of legislation allocated $52.7 billion in federal funding to incentivize companies to build, expand, and equip semiconductor fabs on American soil. It was a dramatic pivot to industrial policy, a declaration that semiconductor manufacturing was now a matter of national security. Officials like Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick began framing the reshoring of chip production as essential to protecting American workers, businesses, and critical infrastructure from the unfair trade practices and strategic ambitions of China. The CHIPS Act created a massive pool of capital, but it needed a champion, an American company with the scale and ambition to absorb those funds and actually build leading-edge fabs. There was only one candidate: Intel. Under the leadership of former CEO Pat Gelsinger, Intel had already embarked on a bold, bet-the-company turnaround strategy called IDM 2.0, Integrated Device Manufacturer 2.0. The vision was twofold. First, to reclaim technological leadership for its own products, and second, to become a world-class foundry, manufacturing chips for other companies, including its direct rivals. The centerpiece of this strategy is an audacious technological roadmap dubbed 5 nodes in 4 years. It's a sprint to catch up to and surpass TSMC, culminating in a revolutionary new manufacturing process called Intel 18A, slated for high-volume production in late 2025. This plan is nothing less than America's best, and perhaps only, hope of achieving semiconductor manufacturing parity with Asia on its own soil. This is the context for Nvidia's investment. The hypothetical $5 billion deal is not for a manufacturing contract today. Intel's 18A process isn't ready yet. Instead, it's a strategic co-development partnership. Under the agreement, Intel will design and manufacture custom x86 CPUs that Nvidia will integrate into its AI data center platforms. Simultaneously, Intel will build new PC chips that integrate Nvidia's powerful RTX GPU chiplets, creating a formidable competitor to their shared rival, AMD. For Nvidia, despite Intel's history of stumbles and the deep-seated rivalry, there is simply no other choice. Samsung in South Korea is an option, but it still faces geopolitical risks. Intel is the only American company with the foundational R&D infrastructure, the engineering talent, the manufacturing experience, and now, the explicit backing of the US government to even attempt to build a leading-edge foundry at scale. In public, Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang has framed the deal in diplomatic, corporate speak. He calls it a historic collaboration and a fusion of 2 world-class platforms that will lay the foundation for the next era of computing. But the subtext is clear. This is Nvidia buying an incredibly expensive insurance policy. It's a calculated gamble that by injecting billions of dollars and its own immense credibility into Intel's comeback story, it can help forge a viable, secure, American-based second source for its most critical products. This alliance is more than just a business transaction. It's a powerful geopolitical signal. The deal was announced shortly after the US government itself took a nearly 10% equity stake in Intel, funded by CHIPS Act grants. High-profile meetings have taken place between tech executives like Jensen Huang and top administration officials. Analysts have explicitly connected Nvidia's investment to Washington's broader industrial policy goals. This is not a series of coincidences. It is a coordinated effort. Nvidia's investment serves as a massive private sector vote of confidence in the US government's chosen national champion. It signals to the market, to America's allies, and most importantly to Beijing, that the titans of US technology are aligning with national strategy. Nvidia gets its insurance policy against a Taiwanese catastrophe. Intel gets a critical lifeline, a marquee customer endorsement, and billions in capital. And the US government gets a powerful validation of its multi-billion-dollar bet on rebuilding America's industrial base. This is modern industrial policy in action, with private capital following public investment to achieve a shared, vital strategic goal. The vision is grand, a revitalized American semiconductor champion, backed by its government and its most powerful tech company, securing the future of the digital world. But the reality is far more complex, and the path forward is fraught with immense challenges and deep-seated skepticism. The single biggest question hanging over this entire strategy is a simple one. Can Intel actually do it? The analyst community is deeply divided, with a significant chorus of skeptics arguing that Intel's foundry ambitions will take years to succeed, if they ever do. This skepticism is rooted in Intel's painful recent history. The company's infamous 14-nanometer debacle saw it stuck on a single manufacturing process node for nearly 6 years, from 2014 to 2020. During that same period, TSMC relentlessly executed, iterating through multiple new generations of technology: 16 nanometers, 10 nanometers, 7 nanometers, and then 5 nanometers, and cementing its technological leadership. This history of overpromising and under-delivering has created a massive credibility gap. The challenge Intel faces is monumental. As one analyst noted, the IDM 2.0 strategy represents the most significant rebuilding of Intel since the transition from memory to microprocessors 4 decades ago. It requires a complete cultural and operational overhaul of a massive, historically insular company, all while trying to execute one of the most aggressive technological roadmaps the industry has ever seen. Even if Intel miraculously hits all its technical milestones, a second, perhaps even more difficult challenge remains: trust. The fundamental business model of IDM 2.0 creates an inherent conflict of interest. Intel is asking its direct competitors, companies like AMD, Qualcomm, Apple, and now, for future products, even Nvidia, to hand over their most valuable and sensitive intellectual property, their chip designs. This is akin to asking Coca-Cola to send its secret formula to a Pepsi-owned bottling plant for production. The fear of industrial espionage, whether real or perceived, is a massive hurdle. Potential customers worry that Intel's foundry division will not be truly independent from its product division, and that insights gained from manufacturing a rival's chip could find their way into Intel's next-generation processors. This trust deficit is not theoretical. In recent SEC filings, Intel has been forced to admit, in stark language, that it has been unsuccessful to date in attracting significant customers to our external foundry business. Despite billions in investment and a massive marketing push, the world's leading chip designers have so far been unwilling to bet their roadmaps on Intel. Nvidia's investment is a crucial first step in breaking this logjam, but it is only a first step. Ultimately, the success or failure of this grand American experiment will be decided in the microscopic realm of transistor architecture. The future of semiconductor leadership hinges on a high-stakes technological showdown between Intel's revolutionary leap and TSMC's evolutionary dominance. Intel's bet is on its 18A process, which introduces 2 brand-new, world-first technologies simultaneously. The first is Ribbon FET, Intel's name for a new gate-all-around transistor architecture that promises significant gains in performance and power efficiency. The second, and more radical innovation, is PowerVia, a backside power delivery network. In simple terms, this is like redesigning a skyscraper to move all its plumbing, wiring, and elevators to the outside of the building, freeing up immense amounts of valuable space on the inside for more efficient layouts. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that, if successful, could allow Intel to leapfrog the competition. TSMC, in contrast, is taking a more conservative path. Its competing N2 process will also use a new gate-all-around transistor architecture, which they call nanosheet, but it will stick with the proven traditional method of front-side power delivery. It is a lower-risk, evolutionary step that builds upon their existing world-class manufacturing expertise and legendary execution. The race is on. Both companies are targeting high-volume production in the second half of 2025. The outcome of this technological duel will not only determine the future of Intel and its partnership with Nvidia, but could also reshape the entire global balance of power in technology.